Let's do this.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm pumped.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right, let's do this.
All right, let's do this.
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Let's do this.
Now let's do this.
Let's do it.
This is the Coaching Life Podcast, episode number 117. 117. And for about 115 of these, I've had a podcasting partner, good friend of mine, Pat Martin, Coach Pat Martin, the head coach of the Megs Marauders baseball team in southeastern Ohio. But there have been a couple of times when Pat couldn't make it to the studio for one reason or another. And this week is one of those times. And so I'm actually flying solo today, and I don't know that I can fill the time that we normally have together because you know how windy he gets. Yeah, I guess we all know that's not true. If you look at the breakdown between who speaks the most on it, I tend to talk over him sometimes, and sorry about that, buddy. But anyway, what I figured I would do today is I figured I would come in and share with you a few thoughts that have been going through my mind here recently, because I had the privilege last night to go and speak with a high school varsity basketball team, the girls varsity basketball team that my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, Heath Hudson, coaches the Megs Marauder girls basketball team, and they were playing in the sectional championship last night. And he invited me to come and speak to the team before the game. And so I thought that was a really cool thing, really neat opportunity for me. And so yesterday morning when I got up, I was thinking about what I wanted to say to them. And I always tend to come back to some very familiar things to me, because I tell you, I love thinking about and talking about and studying culture. I mean, culture, the whole idea of culture is really important to me. And I actually think it's important to everyone, to be quite honest. I mean, there is a culture everywhere. Everywhere we go, every organization, every team, every school, every group that you're part of, a group of friends, every town, every city, everyone has a culture. Every grouping of people has a culture of some sort. Like when you go to a restaurant to eat, sometimes we go to restaurants just solely because of the food, because the food is just really good. And so we go and eat there. But I would submit that a lot of the time we go to a restaurant because of the culture, because of how it invites us as we're considering where we want to go. Perhaps it's the style of dinner that you're looking at. If it's a very nice, fancy restaurant, you're not going to choose Applebee's per se. I mean, you may choose something, maybe, I don't know, it depends on who you are, I guess. But if you want to take your wife out to a nice, fancy dinner, you might think of some other, dimly lit, Italian restaurant where people get a little bit dressed up and go out to eat. If you want to go out someplace with a group of buddies, a group of friends, then yeah, you might go to Applebee's, all right? I guess some people go to Applebee's on a date night with the Oreo shake and the Bourbon Street steak. If my daughter's listening to this podcast, she's going to just roll her eyes right now. She's like, oh, Dad, enough with that song. Put that song to rest. Well, anyway, everybody has a culture. Every group has a culture. And culture gets defined, I think, in a lot of different ways. There are so many books. If you just Google books on culture or go on Amazon.com and put in the search bar, books about culture, you're going to get an endless list of what people have to say about culture. But I think if we really want to consider what culture is in its simplest form, I think it's just this. I think it's the behavior that is needed to drive the strategy on your team or in your organization or with your group, the behavior needed to drive the strategy that allows you to win. I think when it comes to organizations that are trying to be successful and teams that are trying to win, that is a way for us to think about our culture. Behaviors that are needed to drive the strategy that we have as a group, as a unit, to allow us to win. And what that does is it breaks culture down to an individual basis. What that means is, so if you're part of a group or an organization or a team, you have a hand in defining that culture. You have ownership in part of that culture, and your behaviors are driving what that culture is. And we got to make no mistake, culture has nothing to do with what you say it is. You know, I mean, like a lot of teams will say, this is who we are. And then you watch them play and you're going, well, I know the sign says that on their gym floor and their gymnasium, or the sign says that on their dugout or on their fence, but I'm not seeing what their mission statement says. You see, culture is the actual behaviors of a group. It has nothing to do with what you have written down, a book that you gave out. People can read the book and believe in it and say it. You could say 1, 2, 3, whatever your word is of your core values. But if you're not behaving in those ways, then that really isn't your culture. If you really want to know what a culture is, any given culture, invite a stranger to come and just hang out with you for a day, hang out with you at a practice or for a week, and then ask them, okay, what's our culture like? And they'll tell you. Ask them to be honest. They'll tell you. It doesn't matter what you say, it's how you behave. Culture is all about behavior, and it's about the behaviors of every individual member of your group or your team. And so the way I defined this is sort of what I talked about last night with that girls' basketball team. I said, you know what? Every single one of you has ownership in what your team is going to look like and what your team looks like every single day. I mean, granted, you're at the end of the season now, and so this culture conversation would be a great one to have in the off season or in the preseason before you begin. But the reality is, it's every day. We have to consider it every day because it's everyday behaviors, constant behaviors, consistent behaviors. And so the way we looked at it was actually using some terminology that came from Tim and Brian Kite. They used to have an organization called Focus 3. I actually think Tim Kite still runs Focus 3, which has been a tremendous asset to especially school systems, school districts around our state, in particular in Ohio, but they've gone nationally as well. Tim's a national speaker. He's done things with Urban Meyer, Coach Urban Meyer. Whatever you think about Coach Urban Meyer, Tim Kite went in and helped their Ohio State football team in 2013, 2014, sort of define what their core values are. And he talked a lot about this very issue, and that's this. In your organization or team, every single person, you individually have ownership in some way. And so that's defined by space. And so we're going to define it by 20 square feet. So basically, look at where your feet are right now, and that 20 square feet where you're standing is what you have total 100% influence on in this moment. In this very moment, in every moment, in all the moments of your day, in all the moments of your life, in all the moments of your practice, in all the moments of your game, you have 20 square feet, which is your realm of influence, and you own it. What that means is you own. It represents your level of ownership in the culture, your level of ownership in the strategy for what you guys are trying to accomplish out there. And you own that. And your 20 square feet is always where you happen to be right now. It's where your feet are. And way too often, I think we get sidetracked by thinking about the next thing or the next day or the next game or the next goal that we're going to set for ourselves. And we never actually finish where we are or focus on where we are because we're so distracted by other things. Perhaps we're so distracted by things that are outside of our control. Because the reality is 20 square feet isn't a lot, but it's significant because it's everything that you control 100%. It's everything that you have absolute influence over. But in a game or in a practice or in a team, in an organization, there are a lot of things and a lot of people that you have no control over. There are a lot of circumstances and events that are going to come to you that we have zero control over. If you're in a school, for example, you have control over your 20 square feet. You have absolute control with how you're going to behave, how you're going to respond to things in your own space. There are going to be things that happen to you that are not within your control. There are going to be decisions that your principals are going to make, or your teachers are going to make, or your school district as a whole are going to make. There are going to be things that your coach decides that maybe you don't like or agree with. You can't control any of that, but what you can control is how you respond in the space that you're given. And so what happens, and the way this works itself out in teams and organizations and in units, is the next layer of the 20 square feet that you own is this issue of we all belong to a unit. There is power in units. And the unit is something that your 20 square feet is part of, because your unit are the people that you go to work with. You go to work with some people on a daily basis. You go to work with people. If you're in a sport and you're playing a sport, when you step on the practice field, you're going to work with some people. And in fact, the people that you're going to work with might actually be a little bit of a smaller group than your entire team. Because every team has individuals, like individual position, skills and things like that you may work on in that moment. And so now your unit is infielders, or now your unit is just guards or forwards or linemen or defensive backs or running backs, whatever it is. Your unit are those people that you're going to work with right now, and you have 20 square feet inside that unit to have influence. And what happens is when you give absolute relentless effort all the time inside your 20 square feet, you know what happens? It has a ripple effect. And it influences other people's 20 square feet. And it's an awesome thing to watch, because that's how culture begins to develop and spread in an organization. And you can see it everywhere. There's a popular video that's been going around on social media here the past couple of weeks of a student section, a high school basketball gymnasium student section. And this student section is just really awesome. They're all dressed up in red. And then you got one guy on the floor who's dressed up like Moses from the Bible in the book of Exodus. He's got the long robe on and a staff and a long beard. And he's standing on there and he's kind of directing them from side to side, and they're all moving together. Every single kid in that student section is doing the exact same thing, and they're moving like one unit. There's 100 or so kids in the student section, and it's awesome to watch. They're going back and forth, and it looks like waves, like just a big red wave. And all of a sudden, he raises his staff, and he's standing right in the middle of them on the floor in front of them. And when he raises his staff, that middle of the student section just parts like the parting of the Red Sea, and he runs up through the middle, and everybody in the gym goes nuts. And you watch that, and I see things like that, and people don't understand. They often don't consider the fact that there are lots of little units that support what a team might be trying to accomplish on a basketball court, for example. Now, there are only 5 kids on that court. That's one unit working together, 5 kids. There might be 7 or 8 other ones sitting on the bench. That's another unit. They're a bench player. How are they contributing? How are they encouraging? How are they serving their teammates? Are they ready to go? Are they taking mental reps so that when their coach looks down and say, hey, we got to give so-and-so a breather and put you in the game, you're ready to go. You're not crying and complaining because you haven't been in the game up to this point, but you're ready to go when the coach says to go in. What are you doing to contribute in a positive way? Because I'll tell you what, you look across the floor and you see a student section and you see every single one of those people doing their part. That's another contribution to the power of the unit that creates success, that creates motivation and momentum. And it's an awesome thing to see. It's a really cool thing to see. And we all have that. This is how we break it down. You think about, where does it start for me? It starts in my own 20 square feet. And the last thing that I talked about with these girls last night is there's great power in belief. And this is where your entire program really comes into view, because everyone, this is talking about everyone, your coaches, the players, the parents, the other fans and relatives and friends, people who come to attend the game, the athletic directors that work behind the scenes to make it all happen, the announcers, the scoreboard operators, the bookkeepers, the radio folks, the videographers, the band that comes to play and support, the student section, the concession stand workers, the people who take up the tickets, the bus drivers. This is everybody working together. And you know what? The one common thing that all of those people have in common on your side of the floor, on your side of the stadium, on your side of the field, whatever it is, what they all have in common, every single one of them, they all have one thing in common: your team. And they're there and they're doing what they're doing because they believe in you. They believe in what you're doing. They're behind what you're doing. They're supporting what you're doing. And so when you know that, there is incredible power that can be gained from that. It's a proven fact. Belief is a huge issue. It's a proven fact that the highest levels of human performance is linked to, or I can even say it's powered by, the deepest levels of belief. The highest levels of human performance is linked to the deepest levels of belief. When you see yourself in your mind doing something first, succeeding in something first, take it all the way down to like shooting a free throw. Pause for a second. See it in your mind. Take a nice focused breath to slow everything down in that moment. See it happen in your mind and then make it happen physically. Skip Bertman, one of my favorite coaches, baseball coaches to refer to and to read about anything I can get my hands on. He's just absolutely brilliant. He coached at LSU for several years to championships. Skip Bertman said this. He said, everything happens twice. It happens first in your mind and then for real. And it doesn't mean that 100% of the time, if you envision yourself making that free throw, you're going to make it 100% of the time. But I'll tell you what, you'll make it more often than you won't, especially if you think to yourself, well, I hope I don't miss this, and you see it in your mind bouncing off the rim. What happens is you put pressure on yourself to not miss it, and then you end up missing it because that's what you're focused on. But when you focused on what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, when you see yourself and you believe yourself, you believe it, you see it, you envision it happening, that's when you can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, whether positive or negative. And those are the kinds of things that we have to take control of. Those are the kinds of things that we can take control of because we don't have control over whether or not we win. That's correct. We don't have control over whether or not we win. I mean, do you not think that Joe Burrow would have won the Super Bowl the other night if he had control over whether or not he won, or the entire team? I mean, we like to think that we have control over that, but the reality is we don't. There are a lot of other factors that come into play that cause us to win or lose. If I had complete control over whether or not I was going to win, I would win all the time. I would never lose. I wouldn't choose to lose. I'm out there playing to win. I'm out there coaching to win all the time. But there are a lot of factors that come into play. Some of that is talent. Some of that is hard work. But it all works together. And here's the thing. Here's what we do control. We control, every single one of us, we control our own 20 square feet. We control our contribution to the unit. And when a whole bunch of people are giving relentless effort inside their 20 square feet, it has ripple effects on the unit. It creates a culture of winning. And if you end the game and the scoreboard is in your favor, fantastic. But I'll tell you what, even if it doesn't, you're creating winners. You're creating champions. Pat, I miss you, buddy. Too bad we couldn't have this conversation together, but I hope that it's been at least a little bit helpful to those of you who listen. We'll be back together next week. Look for us. God bless you all. Have a great week.